so we can get the most out of our hour here today. Good evening. My name is Leslie Carmona. I'm the Director of Donor Relations here at Wayne State University, and so thrilled to be here with you this evening for this very exciting event. A couple of quick housekeeping items so we get the boring stuff out of the way first. We're going to ask that everybody go ahead and rename yourself on Zoom. So if it says anything like iPad 1, we know who you are. So you can give us your names there in that bottom corner. We'll also encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat box, which you should see below at the bottom of your screen there. You can click there and tell us your name, even your grad year, whatever you'd like. We'd love to see who's here with us in the virtual room. We'd also like you all just to remain muted throughout the presentation. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And you're welcome at that point to use the raise hand function to type your questions in the chat. There are members of the team here that will be monitoring that chat throughout, and we'll make sure that we get all of your questions answered before the end of our time together. But to make sure that we have lots of time for our guests today, I am going to hand it over to Heather, who is the General Manager of Valentine Distilling and an expert mixologist. We're so excited to have her here today to share with us these amazing drinks that we're going to be making with their vodka, which I went out and grabbed because they're only a mile from my house. So I might be a little partial to Valentine's and how wonderful they are. But Heather, please take it away. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you coming to join us for this cocktail class for the hour. I am standing here actually in Valentine Distilling Company's official distillery. So we have been around since 2007. If any of you had visited our tasting room in Ferndale, we opened up there in about 2011, initially distilling there, and after outgrowing that space, wound up with about 20,000 square feet, as you see around me. And of course, obviously, over my shoulder here, we've got our whiskey still, Sherbert. So we'll talk a little bit briefly about our company and some of the spirits we make, and then we will jump right into making some cocktails for you guys. So the first thing I want to point out is the main spirit that we're working with today is Valentine vodka. So we'll talk a little more in detail about each spirit as we get into the drink, but you should have your traditional Valentine vodka here in front of you. And also, we are doing a cocktail featuring the White Blossom vodka. If any of you are not familiar, this is an elderflower and grapefruit infused vodka. So it's got a little bit of a subtle citrusy, floral, sweet taste, but it gives you just enough flavor to kind of steer your drinks rather easily. Now, depending on how much you guys know or do not know about Valentine as a company, we are very well known for our vodka. Our vodka actually has pointed as the world's best vodka 2 years in a row just recently, and that is above 1,100 brands. Belvedere, Kettle One, Grey Goose, you name it, we beat it. And the idea is that we distill in a traditional fashion, utilizing copper stills, quality ingredients, and of course, the human element that really lends into the true art of distillation. So in an era where so many things are mass produced, marketed cleverly, our whole idea is we can sell our spirits because it tastes better. So you guys can be the judge of that. However, aside from our vodka, Valentine Distilling Company also offers 2 types of gin and 2 types of whiskey. So if you guys decide that you want to branch out here a little bit or delve into more of the spirits we have, of course, you can always visit our tasting room at 161 Vester in Ferndale and sample our spirits complimentary. Or if you are lucky enough to have a place around you, you can pick up a bottle or always ask your local store to carry. So what you'll see in different looking bottles from Valentine are also our Liberator gin. This is a more American Nouveau style gin. I would equate it more to a softer distribution of the botanicals in it, akin to maybe a Hendrix or so. So it's not quite as piney as your Bombay and Tanqueray. And actually, this particular spirit blends very well with the White Blossom. Elderflower is a common botanical that you really see frequently mixed in with gin. However, we've got 3 dark bottles along the line here. This is actually also a gin. Liberator here has got a barrel-aged version. We call it Old Tom Liberator Gin. Now, the color comes from spending about 10 months to 2 years in a new American oak cask. What happens is when you put gin into an oak cask in that situation, we often mute all of the younger notes. You get the warm stuff brought up underneath. There's actual coriander, cardamom, and cinnamon in this gin. So if you think you don't like gin, try and give this a taste one time. It kind of walks the line between whiskey and gin. And then, of course, for the whiskey fans out there, Mayor Pingree is our whiskey kind of brand umbrella. We've got a few different iterations, but just for the sake of simplification, today I've brought along our two primary brands that we see. Mayor Pingree Red Label here. This is actually a 4-year bourbon. So it's going to be a little bit sweeter, a little smoother in terms of your whiskey taste, but still very well-rounded, very nicely matured. But if anyone is along more of the, as we often say, spicier side, the flip side to bourbon is a whiskey known as rye, and that is our Mayor Pingree Orange Label here. So our Orange Label rye, obviously, as I mentioned, is a rye whiskey, so it's got a little bit more bite to the flavor, but that is because of the ingredients, not the quality. It's got a really nice, wide breadth of flavors that you get to it. So if you are a rye fan, give this a shot. I avoided whiskey for a long time until I got into our Mayor Pingree. Now, the whole philosophy of Valentine was to distill everything with the quality that we used to. Back in the day when we were booming in manufacturing in the United States, we were creating this growth because of making the better things or the best things that could be put out there. So in that spirit, we've returned to traditional distillation practices, very small batch, which means the stills that you're looking at with me, all the ingredients that go into one batch yield so many bottles and we have to begin again. So every single bottle you see from Valentine Distilling, from the vodka, the gin to the whiskey, has been basically done with hand care and small batches to get that perfected flavor. But I won't take you guys too far into the process of distillation. If you're ever really curious, we do offer a tour here at our distillery. You can come out and see us and learn kind of the ins and outs of that process. Now, as promised, I mentioned I was going to talk a little bit about the Valentine vodka before we got into making the spirit. So not only is this the world's best vodka, if any of you are curious, this is a 3-grain vodka. Corn, wheat, and barley are combined to make a vodka. And the idea is that if we were going to produce a vodka in Michigan, we wanted to source on local grains, things that were grown in or around the state of Michigan. So we could create a supply line that made sense in our area to produce local and then get out to the rest of the world. However, a lot of people do not realize vodka can be made out of anything that breaks down to a starchy or sugary consistency. So we hear potato vodka a lot because it's relatively easy to source, pretty inexpensive, something that companies can rely on as an easy ingredient to lean on. But that being said, the 3 grains does give us a really nice mouthfeel. Because vodka is a neutral spirit, we have pretty much distilled it to such a high proof that the ingredients' flavors have been taken away. However, a proper distillation process does leave a subtle aroma, a little flavor, and obviously some finish. So what you want to pay attention to, if you are curious to taste your vodka before you make a cocktail, is the viscosity of this. There's often kind of a warmer, meringue, orangey flavor after you sip. By no means a flavored vodka, but what you pull from it, there's no wrong answer. So I encourage you all to actually taste your Valentine before just putting it into a cocktail. It does give you a really nice idea of where the lines stand and qualities of vodka. So the cocktail that we are looking at making today is known as Belle's Garter. Now, Belle's Garter was one of our most popular selling cocktails for many, many years. And the best way I would describe it is a twist on a cosmopolitan, a little bit less boozy, but all the great flavor with the ability to have more than one. But before we get into mixing a cocktail, I want to introduce you guys to some of the tools that we utilize, not only at our bar, but I personally have at home. I always recommend stocking your bar with the proper tools if you're somebody who is into playing with craft cocktails, it really allows you to dial in everything beautifully. So the first thing I want to point out, and I do have some conversions here. If anybody was not able to get themselves a measuring cocktail jigger, we have some tablespoon and teaspoon substitutions for you to be able to work with. However, there's a lot of different types of cocktail jiggers. What I've got here is a graduated jigger. So it's got a variety of different little marks on it that tell me what is a ½ ounce, 3/4, 1 ounce, 1½, so on and so forth. So for most recipes, this is going to give you maximum control. You will also see other types of jiggers that have got just a larger top and a smaller bottom. These are usually a 1 ounce to a 1½ ounce. Just read your information. And for the most part, if you guesstimate a little bit, you're going to get it right. The idea is that our bar, though, has to be on point every time. So if you get an opportunity, the jigger is fantastic. The next thing I always recommend a bar have is a proper strainer. Now, this is known as a Hawthorne strainer. The difference between what you're seeing with mine and what a lot of you may have at home is the density of the screws here, or excuse me, the springs here. So the aim of a Hawthorne strainer is to keep your ice from coming out of your shaker as you pour your drink in. That being said, if you've got very separated springs, you get a little more ice that sneaks through. So the tighter the spring that you can find, the better quality your Hawthorne strainer is going to be. And many of you will probably not have this, but if you ever get an opportunity and you're very into craft, I recommend a mesh strainer. These fine sieve strainers basically are going to catch any little bit of citrus pulp, or in the case of the white blossom, maybe little chunks of basil leaves, any fresh ingredient that you're putting in that might have escaped your Hawthorne, you can then catch in this and give a really beautiful clarified cocktail at that point. Now, the most important thing too, though, is I have mixing tins here. I'm sure not everybody has mixing tins. If you do, obviously we'll be utilizing those. If not, a couple pint glasses will do. You may not be able to shake with us, but we will probably suggest you do some pouring back and forth to blend together the citrus, the cranberry in our particular Belle's Garter, and the other ingredients in our honey blossom. So this particular shaker I have here is a 2-part shaker. Most people have seen your standard shakers that have the bottom, the cap that goes on with the built-in strainer. Nothing wrong with this. If anything, though, that built-in strainer is an optimal excuse to get yourself a mesh strainer because they tend to be a little large, but the idea is essentially the same. The ingredients go in, you're going to close it up. This just happens to cap on top. You shake with your ice, and then after you remove your cup, you can strain from there to enjoy your drink. So there's a whole lot of things that you can choose to stock your bar with, but there's usually a lot of shorthand options. So in lieu of that, I'm going to give you guys some conversions as we go through the cocktails here and just kind of make it where it's something that if you don't happen to have a jigger, you can still replicate at home. So that being said, let's go ahead and move forward and step into our Belle's Garter martini. Now, if you guys happen to have a proper martini glass at home, even though this is served in a martini, it doesn't have the standard alcoholic content of your typical martini. So a little bit lighter, but the proper aesthetic would be served up in this type of glass. Now, martinis are actually Art Deco, which hence the shape of this triangular glassware. It does mean that it's a little more likely to spill. So it is not bad etiquette to leave maybe half or almost a finger from the top of it, just so that if you were serving it to guests, you're not getting it everywhere. But that being said, we'll move on into our recipe here. So what I'm going to have everybody gather in front of them, if you haven't already, is your traditional Valentine vodka. We're going to be using some fresh cranberry juice here. Obviously, you want to use a sweetened cranberry. We tend to enjoy simply cranberry. They've got a variety of different juices that are all very good flavor, but they often sell them in smaller bottles, so a good one for you guys to pick up. Now, we also have what is known as simple syrup. Now, this is not complicated. If anybody has seen this on a menu and been completely at a loss about what simple syrup was, this is basically just a mix of hot water and sugar. You do a 1-to-1 ratio and then refrigerate it. So the idea is you don't have to worry about any sugar grains being in your mix. You get a nice, smooth liquid finish. So what I would recommend is, if any of you are in the market to do this, get yourself a little mason jar, equal parts hot water and sugar. You're going to mix or heat until it dissolves, fill it down. And if you happen to put a little vodka in there, it'll generally be good for a couple weeks for you. So what we have here, of course, is our house-made simple syrup. And then the last thing that is very, very important is fresh lemon juice. It's very easy for us to lean on those squeezer bottles of the lemon or the lime concentrate. I always recommend fresh because it makes such a drastic difference in the final flavor. And what I would say is pick up a few lemons and just do your own pressing at home. Easy, you usually won't need more than a ½ ounce to an ounce per cocktail. So unless you're really serving a crowd, it's absolutely acceptable. So what we're gonna do here is gather our elements that we need for this cocktail. The most important part is if you are lucky enough to have a separated jigger, we're going to start with the bottom portion first. If you have a standard jigger with a strainer on top, you can go ahead and put the big cup in front of you. And what we're going to do is add all of our ingredients before we get to adding ice. So for Belle's Garter, we're going to go ahead, grab our jigger here, and we're going to be doing 1½ ounces of vodka. Now, for any of you at home that don't have a jigger, that is going to be 3 tablespoons of vodka. I'll give you all a moment to add that in. Next, we're going to grab our cranberry juice here. Now, cranberry, we're going to be doing 1 ounce, which is 2 tablespoons here of vodka. Now we want to temper a lot of that sweet, of course, so we're going to bring in here our lemon juice. This is only going to take a ½ ounce of lemon juice, or in the case of you using tablespoons, 1 tablespoon. And then the last thing on our list is that simple syrup. If you guys happen to have just a regular bit of sugar with you, you can mix in about a ½ teaspoon. If you have gotten crafty and made yourself simple syrup, you can mix in a full teaspoon of that. If not, it's going to be a ½ ounce of simple for anybody using our jigger here. All right, guys, so now we've got all the good stuff in. We're going to go ahead, set our glass right in center, and now comes the fun part. This is where we're going to be adding some ice to go ahead and shake. So at this point, go ahead and put some ice into your jigger there. We're going to cap it, and then I want everybody to give it a good shake. Now, if anyone's gotten fancy and gotten themselves a 2-section jigger, the best way to separate these once they're stuck together is to take the heel of your hand here, and you might have to hit it a couple times, but you're going to hit it right on the break. Generally, going to separate that seal. We'll set the top half aside, and now we come to our straining portion. So we're going to take our Hawthorne strainer, set it on top here, or of course, if you have your built-in strainer as is. And most Hawthorne strainers are going to have a small little notch here near the handle. This is so your index finger can really push that screen to the front so that when you pour, you get the optimal straining. Now, once we have our Belle's Garter, there is one more vital ingredient to every cocktail, and that is a proper garnish. So what I would recommend here is to get yourselves a whole lime. Now we can do this a variety of ways. We could be very fancy about it. We could be very casual, but I'm going to show you the dressy way that we happen to do it. We're going to cut the end off of the line here, straight down, and then we're going to cut another line so that we actually get what's known as a wheel here of our line. Now from the center point to the out, we're going to take our knife and cut a small slit so that we have space for this to sit on the edge of the glass. And at that point, you can slide it on and you officially have a Belle's Garter. So cheers, everybody. Enjoy your drink here. And we're going to set that off to the side. Give me one moment. We're going to check on our time. And then in a few moments, we'll be beginning on our honey blossom. And you guys will be able to enjoy that one cocktail as we're going through. One moment. All right, one moment, folks. We are going to bring up the flavor. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So hopefully all of you guys are enjoying your Belle's Garter. I won't rush right into pouring our honey blossom here. We'll talk a little bit about our white blossom vodka while you guys have a moment to enjoy that cocktail. So the other vodka that I very, very briefly mentioned today was our white blossom vodka. Now, white blossom really was born out of this trend of flavored vodka. Let's be honest, about 10, 15 years ago, we saw a massive explosion. Absolute, pretty much every company that you can think of was doing a vast variety of different flavors and options, which sounds hypothetically a nice way to introduce an initial flavor. But the problem that was occurring is that most of these companies were relying on chemically reduced essences of flavor or syrups, additional sugars. You get a lot of glycerin mixed in. So the idea is that we wanted to create a sweeter vodka that didn't have all of the falsity to it. So looking at a lot of the different botanicals that we were seeing over in Europe, complementing gin, going into some more European flavored vodkas, we kept hearing elderflower over and over again. So elderflower is a very mild floral taste, but of course, having a little bit of that edge. Not everybody is comfortable with kind of rose or, violet edges to it, which you see in other types of liqueurs. So we decided to temper that white blossom with a little bit of grapefruit. So that grapefruit kind of takes us toward a citrus edge. Now, that being said, you can really mix white blossom with almost anything. Lemonade, soda, tonic, water, the gin, lime juice. It makes a great white blossom gimlet. So really the sky is the limit with what you want to do with your white blossom. But one of the nice things is that even though you're getting into a flavored vodka, it's not quite so pigeonholed that it ties you down with the flavor that you have chosen. And also, we use all natural Michigan beet sugar to sweeten our vodka. So it's got a subtle natural sweetness to it. Takes the proof down from only about 80 to 70, but it winds up with a sweeter edge and subsequently 20% less calories than your standard flavored vodka. So White Blossom is easily the fastest selling and growing spirit in our brand here. So I highly encourage you to try it if you haven't, or at the very least, get yourself a little smell, a little taste before we get into our honey blossom cocktail. Now, a little disclaimer with our honey blossom cocktail, it is technically a martini. So this is going to be a full-fledged pour of spirits here. Typically martinis come in as opposed to our first drink with about 1.5 ounces of alcohol in it, 2.5 to sometimes 3 ounces of alcohol in a martini. So I will warn you, it's going to taste delicious, but we want to sip slowly. So for our honey blossom cocktail, I actually have a little different glassware that we tend to use in the tasting room. However, feel free to lean on your martini. That is always a nice way to present it, but you could really do it in almost any glass. The glass we're going to be using today from our tasting room is known as a coupe glass. Now, coupe glasses are nice. They are not quite as tall as your martini. You've got a little bit of this nice curvature. It tends to hold the drink a little bit more nicely without that option for spillage here. So we're going to set our coupe aside. And what we want to do is gather our ingredients, of course, for our white blossom honey blossom martini. So, of course, the white blossom vodka here. Get our tools ready. And really, this is a very, very easy recipe. We are going to be utilizing only a couple things. Some fresh basil leaves here. We're going to need about 4 basil leaves. If you have 3 large ones, you want to set those aside for muddling. And the prettiest basil leaf you have, we are going to utilize for our garnish. Now, I'm not sure how much information we got into in terms of prep, but this recipe uses the white blossom vodka, basil, and honey. Now, to simplify things, most people have got standard honey. We have made a honey simple syrup. So akin to the same way, you would mix that granular sugar with hot water. You can do the same thing with honey, and it's not quite so difficult to pour and utilize, or at least you don't have to spend so long per drink. But I do recommend keeping a little bit of standard honey around, because this is going to be the sticking point for our garnish that we utilize. So for this martini here, I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to get your small tin. And we are going to start off with a bit more of a hefty pour, as mentioned. So the white blossom is coming in at 2.5 ounces. So in the case of this jigger, all the way to the top of your white blossom vodka. Now, any of you utilizing other measurements, that is going to be 5 tablespoons of your white blossom. So let's go ahead and measure it up. We'll give you guys a second. I'm sure I'm just a little ahead of you having my measuring jigger. All right. Once you've got your white blossom in, we are going to go ahead and drop in about those 3 basil leaves here. And then once we've got our basil sitting in with that vodka, we've got our honey syrup. Now, if you guys are doing standard honey at home, I would really only keep it to about 3/4 of a teaspoon. The honey, we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons, also known as 1/4 of an ounce. All right. Okay, so now that we have our honey in here, our basil, what I'm going to actually have you guys do is prep your glass before we get into the shaking process. It can get a little messy if you happen to garnish it after the fact. So we're going to go ahead and take our honey here. I'm lucky enough to have a squeeze bottle. If you don't, just get yourself maybe a little bit of a back of a straw or something, just narrow where you can get a little dollop. The idea is we're just putting a dot on here so that we can then take our beautiful basil leaf and press it right on the side of the glass. Might need a little bit more honey for this one. Beautiful. So once you've got that in play, you guys know what's coming next. We've got to add in our ice here. Tap our shakers. And everybody, give your drink a shake. Point out, we see a lot of different drinks, sometimes shaken, sometimes stirred. What I like to tell people is that the shake or the stir is an integral part to the cocktail. The dilution you get from the ice is a good thing. We want to balance out the flavors and really bring out everything that is present in that cocktail. So this is the point at which it's helpful to have a little bit of ice to shake with. So we're going to go ahead and do our straining here into our coupe glass. And again, the nice thing about this double strainer, catching any little bit of that basil, and you should have a nice, subtle, light green color to your honey blossom martini. So cheers. And a little bit of info for you guys as well. These cocktails are, of course, shaken. We're working with clear spirits and citrus. But the rule of thumb is if you have a mix of ingredients and it is a clear spirit, shaking is okay. If you have a dark spirit, like whiskey or barrel-aged gin, as much as shaking would seem like the natural option, you are typically going to stir those cocktails unless there is citrus or egg in the combination. So the idea is we don't want to aerate these aged spirits unless there's something in it that is only going to blend the flavors if we were to do that accordingly. So this is why we have that difference in the treatment. However, with clear spirits, because it can be shaken or stirred, that's why you have the option. So guys, I want to encourage you to enjoy your cocktails here. We are going to be entering a bit of a Q&A session here in just a few moments. And at that point, if you have any questions about the company, about the spirits, about history, or even the cocktails that you have happened to make, I would be happy to assist you as best I can. So give me one moment here, guys. We're going to be moving on to that in just a second. All right. So guys, I know we're moving a little bit ahead of schedule here, but the idea is we can sip and chat as we go. So right now we have your chat box up. If you guys do know, there is typically a raise hand function. If you happen to do that, my assistant's going to let me know who's got their hand up for a question, and then we can have you ask from there. So please take a moment. If you've got a question, raise your hand, and we will get to you in just a few moments. That's all right. It's going to take just a moment. Now, while we're waiting, I can at least fill you guys in on a little bit more details about us. So when we got into our White Blossom, we were talking a lot about botanicals. One thing I like to point out is that we are one of the few companies that utilizes fresh herbs and botanicals in not only our White Blossom vodka, but our gin. Because there's such difficulty with a lot of sourcing of the quality of these types of ingredients and all the botanicals that go into gin, we can have as many as 7 to 14 plus. These are often utilized by companies that make a chemically reduced essence for the sake of consistency. We do source from all over the world. Do we have a question, Haley? All right. Got a question here.
Hi. Hi, I'm Rochelle.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Brown. Nice to meet you. So you're
Pleasure to meet you, Michelle.
oh, you're Hector. You're Heather, eh? So
Yes, I am.
yeah, nice to meet you. I wanna know I want to know. Yeah, I want to know. So my answer is, where was Valerie? That was Valentine Distilling Company was founded? Like where y'all come from to make these
Yeah.
awesome cocktails.
So our owner, founder, president, and master distiller is actually Rufino Valentine. Now, he is a native from Leelanau County, up north Michigan, where he was born and raised. Very brilliant guy, ended up attending Cornell. And after working for so many years in New York and just seeing the culture of this kind of brand marketing over quality, he got really disillusioned to that world. And it just didn't seem like where he wanted to stay. So he decided at 35 to quit his job and start what would become our first great American spirit company. So we actually initially, and I'm going to say, I'm sorry, Wayne State, we partnered up with Michigan State University because they were one of the only universities in our area that had a distillation program taking off at that time. So before we were investing in all of the beautiful equipment around me, we had to crash course our way into finding the best vodka we could make. So that is where the development actually started. And then we eventually purchased our tasting room off of Vester. That was the primary space for distillation up until about 2015 when we relocated here. Okay, we've got another question.
Hi, my name is
Hi,
my name is Jennifer. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I had two quick questions. What was the name of the spirit that came right before the Pingree whiskey?
Yes, the gin was the Liberator brand gin, and you have the traditional Liberator, and then the dark Liberator is our Old Tom Liberator gin.
Perfect. And then my other question was, my husband and I enjoyed your outdoor winter tent this past winter. It was a really wonderful experience. Do you know if there's plans to continue that for this coming winter?
So at this point in time, we were very, very happy to be lent by the city that space for our tent partially in the street. However, depending on how things develop with COVID, the city of Ferndale may or may not decide that they want those parking spots back. So our goal here is to continue as many options as we have for people to be inside, outside, spaced out, the whole 9 yards. So I wish I had a certain answer on that, but at this point, we're not quite sure. Fingers crossed, though. It was a really great experience.
Fair enough. Absolutely. We'll come to enjoy you no matter what. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We really appreciate the support. Do we have any others at this moment? If anybody else has a question, feel free to pipe on in. The list is open right now. And while we're waiting for that, I had motioned to you guys in the beginning here behind me, Sherbert, a little bit of information about our whiskey still. This is a 1,500 gallon copper pot whiskey still. It's actually the largest copper pot whiskey still in a micro distillery in the United States. Now, because whiskey has gotten so incredibly popular, we actually decided to, of course, invest in larger machinery before we got Sherbert. So Sherbert is made from a company called Frilli, based in Italy. Now, this is the first still that Frilli has made for an American company in over 100 years. So it was quite a bit of a new joining of two companies together, but Sherbert was custom designed for us, just over in pieces, and then we put it mostly together, brought some Italians over to help us finish the way. So that is how we ended up with a much larger option for distillation here. And even though I don't happen to have it, if you guys do get a chance to visit the tasting room and you're a whiskey enthusiast, there are other special iterations of Mayor Pingree, some single cask, also cask strength, which I can get into if we have time, and some small batch versions as well. So I encourage you to come check it out. Did we get another question, Haley? Oh, no, this time. All right. Well, then I can also clarify on the other types here. So Mayor Pingree Bourbon here was our first whiskey to hit the market. However, with bourbon and rye, there's always those collectors that are looking for something a little bit more specialized. So typically, when you're making whiskey, we're going to distill everything, and then it has to be aged. Of course, I don't have one on camera, but for a minimum of 2 years in a new American oak cask. So we do 4 years. To us, that is the shortest period of time we think should go into it. And obviously, once we come out from that, we've got a variety of different flavors from barrel to barrel that then have to be blended to get you this taste as consistently as we've had in the past. Now, when I mention cask strength, what that means is when you guys typically see a bottle of whiskey, it's going to come in at about 190 proof or so, 100 proof. Cask strength is how it actually comes out of the barrel, which typically runs to between about 110 to 120 some proof. The alcoholic percentage is half of your proof. So most of these are coming in at about 45% to 50%. These are going to be bumping up quite a bit. So you get a lot more bang in the flavor. The other thing is single barrel. As I mentioned, these are blends of different barrels for that similar consistency. When you get single barrel batches, there's only so many bottles that get squeezed out of that barrel. So it's a limited experience. And then after that, they're gone. And that's where you get a lot of collectors who seek out the single barrel pick. We've got a question. Okay. Yeah. So the rules on shipping. We as a company are not allowed to ship to your doorstep or other states, but there are a variety of third-party companies that will ship on behalf of spirit companies. So what you would want to do is actually head over to our website. There's a link under distribution that will take you to a variety of different spots where you can order it for delivery if you're not lucky enough to have a friend in the Detroit area. However, I will say Valentine is not just a Michigan spirit. We are now in New York, Washington, D.C., Maine, Maryland, Tennessee. We've got limited release in Ontario, Spain and Italy. We've jumped the pond. So if you are in a state that happens to be listed on our ever-growing list of states that we distribute, ask your local store. Typically what they will have is a book of all the spirits that are allowed to be sold by that state. And if you let them know there's a market for it, they can help you out. So good luck on your hunt. Okay, we've got another question. And what was last? Oh, prompting us. Changing up our cocktail menu, when and how and why. So we tend to change more our specials than our standard menu. We've gone through a few iterations over the years because, of course, from 2015 to where we are now, opening in 2011 to where we are now, things have changed quite a bit in the craft world, not only in complexity, but in the taste that people really enjoy. So generally, our standard menu to be a little bit consistent as long as everybody seems to be enjoying those selections. Now, our specialties, that is a different matter. You often will find a couple little featured items at the top of our menu that are largely seasonal. So depending on what we are getting in, right now we happen to have a cocktail called Strawberry Fields Forever. It is the very same white blossom that you guys have been drinking, soaked in strawberries. If you ever want to try an infusion at home, I highly recommend it. Get a small enough container, a mason jar or something where you can experiment. Try just a little bit to see how it goes, but it's really hard to go wrong. Valentine vodka and cucumber, just take the skin off, makes an excellent gimlet. The white blossom and the strawberry gives a really nice natural sweetness, so you don't have to resort to extra sugar if you don't want to. But you will see the specials change up with what I can get best in season at that time, and of course, what's going to really play into the season that we're feeling. right now, we've just rolled out a few months ago frozen cocktails for the summer. So really, the sky's the limit here. That is a really good question. How do we name our cocktails and the good stories? Well, I can't say that there's many stories behind the cocktails other than the fact that we all really like dad jokes. So there's a lot of punniness. You will find cocktails on the menu such as whiskey business. We've had the robusty nail as opposed to a rusty nail. There's a lot of different things we play with, but being a small house, as large as Valentine seems as a company, we're very much a small family. It is a handful of people here, Rufino, Justin, our other head distiller, usually a handyman or a helper, and then all of us running the show over at the tasting room. So often when a new cocktail comes about, it is this fun game of maybe a play on the ingredients involved or a riff on what the original name of that cocktail might be. We just try to have as much fun with it as possible, and just say that's one of the better parts of the job. Oh, fantastic. Love that you guys enjoy the Belle. How are we doing on time, Hale? All right, so we'll talk a little bit too, go back to aging here too and see if this prompts any of your questions. Guys, I have mentioned that this barrel-aged gin here was aged. Now, with the whiskey, we talked about it going into new American oak cask for 4 years. Because the Old Tom gin isn't whiskey, we can afford to age it a little bit less. So it typically spends about 10 months to 2 years. But instead of using a fuzz cask, we'll often use a slightly smaller cask to get a little bit more flavor and a little bit more color. So often, depending on the darkness of what you're looking at, you can really tell how long it has been inside those barrels. And when it is in a barrel, this is where we get a lot of the flavor change from the contraction of the wood. So it actually lets tannins in, which are going to impart a little bit of that oaky flavor that people know, but it also really matures the existing flavors that are in. Takes in the case of whiskey, corn, rye, and barley, and pulls out all that variety of notes that we get. Sometimes it's caramel, sometimes it's biscotti, sometimes it's more of a leather taste, which I know does not sound appealing, but if you read taster's notes, they're very much more about kind of that after aroma than the initial hit. But when you have something like the botanicals in the gin that we're working with, this is where we can really see how barrels take those more delicate flavors, your citrus, your floral, and really kind of tamp those down almost in a way where they are just not the present flavor. And then all of the warm notes, the things that are a little more robust, the spices, really kind of get pushed to that front there. So if anything, it's kind of like the traditional Liberator flips on its head after aging in this barrel. So it does mean we have to do a bit of kind of pairing up after the fact of different barrels to see what it's going to give us our most predictable flavor. But it does allow us to kind of enter into this new subset of gin. I shouldn't say new, but newly popular subset of gin, because Old Tom has been around for a while. Which actually allows me to impart on this. Where did Old Tom come from? So Old Tom gin actually goes back to way back when we were getting a lot of gin coming over from London, and it was getting brought over in ships. And usually that would mean it was put into a cask. Several months later, they end up at their final destination, and here is your gin. But after being in that barrel, the flavor changed. And not only that, but because gin was so not palatable back in the day, we're talking eras where gin was cut with sawdust, with turpentine, with all sorts of horrible things because there was no spirit regulation. This is where people realized that after being in that barrel, and sometimes they put a little extra sugar ingredients in it, they were able to come out with a gin that was actually good. So Old Tom was kind of born as this subcategory. But the tricky thing about Old Tom is that it is not required that it is barrel aged. It is merely an aspect of some old time gin. Generally, old time gins mean all of those botanicals, including the juniper berry, which is a piney note, are just more evenly distributed. So it really allows, when you age it, for those undernotes to show. Now, one of the things I would encourage you guys as we are starting to wind down is there's obviously always awards and things that come with spirits. There's a lot of local distillation, and what we say, support your local companies. It is always wonderful to lift up our small companies. The big ones are doing fine, but we say trust your palate. If you are ever, trying to decide, just taste test. Give yourself that opportunity. And 9 times out of 10, when you don't cover your spirits, they can really shine if the quality is there. So by all means, step out of your comfort zone. Try a spirit you may have kissed off from way back when, and you might be surprised. We're in a really brave new era of distillation, of variety, and there is a lot out there to try. So I encourage you guys, good food, good company, and good drinks. So how are we doing here? Good, good. Does anybody have any last minute questions for us? All right. Well, we might have one rolling in just a moment, folks.
Hi.
Hello there.
Hi. So, hi, it's me again. I just say, my last question. My last question is, does Valentine Distillery Company have awards for the awesome vodka, for the best vodka? It's like you had the best taste of cocktails. You still have awards for that?
Yeah, that is actually, no, it's a great question. We have not only competed and won many awards for our vodka, world's best vodka 2 years in a row at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. But one of the funny things is that our vodka has taken a lot of awards, and that's what most people hear, the White Blossom for best flavored vodka. But when we started competing, we branched into international competing as well, because to us, it's all great if you're the best in the United States, but we wanted to see how we stood on the world stage. So that's where, once our vodka started competing internationally, we started putting out our gin, we started putting out our whiskey. And what you'll find is if you poke around a little bit, our gin and our Old Tom gin, and even now our whiskey coming up behind, are really pushing on almost the same number of awards. So we approach every spirit with the same attitude. Make something that can not only compete, but beat on an international level. How are we doing on questions? Great. All right, guys. Well, I think that means we may be winding down. If anyone has the last minute question, please feel free to jump in. If not, I believe we are going to be turning it back over to our host, but I want to thank you all for joining me today. It was my pleasure to teach you some cocktails. Hopefully you have learned something, and cheers.
Thank you so much, Heather. I have to say, I really enjoyed.
My pleasure.
Not only that, but I managed to rustle up a martini glass while we were while we were talking. So thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody that joined us this evening. It was absolutely wonderful. And just a couple of things to close out our evening or our cocktail hour with. Just a reminder to make sure that you're following the Alumni Association on all of our social media. And we encourage you to do the same. If you're interested in learning more about Valentine Distilling, you can absolutely follow them via their social media and check out their website. And if and when you're ever around the Ferndale area, I highly recommend stopping by their actual tasting room and giving one of their special cocktails a try. It is absolutely wonderful. So make sure you follow us, check your emails often. There'll be one more of the summer cocktail series coming out in the next few weeks. And we hope that you'll join us for that one as well. But other than that, just a big thank you again to Heather and to Valentine for a wonderful presentation. And we hope to see you all at the next one. So have a great night, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.